Who do you think you are questioning me like that? The older man snapped, his voice sharp and indignant. I didn't flinch. I didn't lower my eyes or let my voice tremble. I had spent years learning how to command a room, how to silence egos twice my age with nothing but truth and control. So, I kept my gaze steady and replied, Mr. Ingwen, I said, my tone measured, calm but firm, I'm here to help you. But if you want my help, I need the whole picture. Every detail. No half-truths. No emotional outbursts. Just facts. He exhaled sharply, chest rising and falling with the weight of his pride. His weathered face twisted in something between anger and shame. But he didn't argue. Not this time. He looked away, shaking his head like he couldn't quite believe the situation he was in, or who he was speaking to. My name is Danielle. That's the name I chose for myself. I'm 30 years old, and I'm an attorney. A damn good one. I've represented politicians, CEOs, small businesses, and single mothers fighting for child support. I didn't inherit my career. I carved it out of stone with blood, grit, and a fire that refused to die. I never carried my family's last name. I left it behind like a shed skin. I built something of my own. My own name. My own identity. My own legacy. Because I wasn't raised by love. I was forged by abandonment. When I was 6, my parents dropped me off at a Catholic orphanage just outside Richmond, Virginia. I remember their car pulling away, the brake lights blinking like a heartbeat that was fading. My little suitcase was next to me, packed with clothes that were too small. They didn't look back. They didn't cry. They didn't explain. I was left wondering what I had done wrong. 4 years. I still remember the way the nuns whispered about me, the way they said poor child like it was my name. The way other kids had visiting days, and I didn't. The way birthdays came and went without a card, without a cake, without a single person claiming me. It took me years to understand, they didn't want me. And yet, 2 decades later, here they were, Charles and Marion Ingwen, sitting in my office. Needing me. Begging, really, but too proud to say it. Charles, my father, was being investigated for white-collar crimes, and the business he spent a lifetime building was collapsing. Fraud. Tax evasion. Insider trading. You name it. And apparently, I'm the only one who could help clean up the mess. The irony? It wasn't lost on me. Not one bit. I didn't become a lawyer to help people like him. I did it to beat people like him in court. The arrogant, rich, selfish men who thought rules didn't apply to them. And now he was on the wrong side of the table, across from me. You're not the only attorney, Charles muttered, breaking the silence. No, I agreed. But I'm the best one who's willing to meet with you. He didn't deny it. Marion sat beside him quietly. Her face was paler, thinner than I remembered from the few childhood memories I still carried. Her eyes were glassy. She wouldn't meet mine. She hadn't said a word since they walked in. And truthfully, I wasn't sure what she could say that would matter anymore. Charles straightened his tie, still trying to cling to the illusion of power. We came to you because we were told you're relentless. I smirked. That's one word for it. I didn't expect this much attitude, he snapped. I didn't expect to ever see your face again, I said without blinking. So I guess we're both surprised. He clenched his jaw. His eyes darted toward Marion, like she might intervene. But she didn't. She just looked smaller in her seat. Fragile. Like regret had hollowed her out. You're angry, he said finally. I'm not angry, I replied. I'm focused. There's a difference. He leaned forward. So, what will it take for you to help us? And there it was. Not an apology. Not an explanation. A negotiation. Like this was a deal. I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms. You want my help, Charles? You'll get it. But not because you're family. You made sure of that a long time ago. You'll get it because you'll pay for it. Like everyone else. His nostrils flared. So you're just in it for the money? No, I said. I'm in it for the truth. And the truth costs extra when it's buried under years of lies. He didn't respond. I stood up and walked toward the window, my eyes tracing the skyline outside. The world looked so small from up here. So neat. We'll start Monday, I said. Bring every document you have. Every file. Don't lie to me, and don't waste my time. When I turned back, Charles and Marion were both standing. They looked older than I remembered. Weaker. But I wasn't a little girl anymore. I wasn't begging for love. I was the one holding all the cards now. And I was just getting started. Monday morning arrived faster than expected. My assistant, Tori, buzzed me the moment they stepped into the building. They're here, she said, voice flat. Your parents. I appreciated that she didn't try to soften the word. These weren't people I had family dinners with. These weren't people who taught me to ride a bike or held me after nightmares. These were just two strangers who happened to share my DNA, and who had left a 6-year-old girl alone in the world without a second thought. I opened the file on my desk and reviewed the notes I'd made over the weekend. It was bad. The kind of bad that would destroy a reputation in seconds and ruin lives for years. Multiple shell companies, undocumented loans, consulting fees to people who didn't exist. It was a textbook disaster. And it was deliberate. They weren't just sloppy. They were arrogant. When they entered my office, Charles walked in like he still owned everything. His shoes clicked against the marble floor, posture straight, shoulders stiff. But there was something different in his eyes now. A flicker of doubt. He hated needing help. Especially mine. Marion followed him quietly, clutching a folder to her chest like a lifeline. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering for a moment on the photo on my shelf, me in my graduation robe, arms raised in victory, alone. No proud parents in that picture. Sit, I said simply, motioning to the 2 leather chairs across from my desk. Charles didn't like being ordered. I saw it in the tight line of his jaw. But he sat. I stayed standing. Here's what we're going to do, I began, flipping open the folder. You're going to give me full access, emails, financials, personal bank statements, business contacts. I'm going to start with the most recent transactions and work my way back. If I catch either of you hiding anything, I walk. Charles opened his mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. Don't. You're not in a position to argue. Marion reached into the folder and slid a stack of documents across the table. These are the files you asked for, she said softly. It was the first time she'd spoken directly to me in decades. Her voice hadn't changed. Still delicate. Still unsure. Thank you, I said, taking the papers. For a second, she looked up at me, like she wanted to say more. Something real. But she didn't. I started flipping through the files. So you're telling me, I said, not looking up, that you had no idea your name was on 6 fake companies? Charles scoffed. Of course I didn't. My accountant handled all that. Your accountant is in the Bahamas, I said dryly, living very well off your money. His face twisted. You're saying I'm being framed? No, I said calmly. I'm saying you were careless. Maybe greedy. And now you're going to pay the price. He leaned forward, eyes hard. I made mistakes, fine. But don't pretend you're better than me just because you got a few degrees and wear a suit. I snapped the folder shut and looked him dead in the eye. I'm better than you, I said. Because I survived you. Silence. Even Marion's breath caught. You don't get to lecture me about what I've become, I continued. You threw me away like garbage. And now you want my help? You'll get it. But you will never get the right to judge me. Charles sat back, his pride visibly cracking. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. This wasn't about revenge. This was about control. I needed them to know that I wasn't that abandoned little girl anymore. I wasn't desperate for their love. I wasn't waiting for apologies. I was the one cleaning up their mess now. And they would answer to me. As the meeting wrapped up, Marion lingered by the door while Charles walked ahead. "I didn't want to leave you," she said quietly, barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. I just looked at her. Her eyes brimmed with something close to tears. Or guilt. I couldn't tell. "It wasn't my choice," she added, voice trembling. He said we couldn't afford you. That we had to focus on the business. That one child was already too much." I stared at her. "You could have visited." She blinked. "You could have sent a letter. A photo. A birthday card. Anything." Her lips parted. But no words came. I stepped past her and opened the door. "Bring everything tomorrow," I said coldly. "And Marion?" She looked up, hopeful. "Don't ever lie to me again." The next morning, I was at my desk before the sun had fully risen, sorting through the stack of documents that my parents had reluctantly handed over. The more I read, the more disgusted I became. It wasn't just bad, it was intentional. They had systematically drained their business and personal accounts, funneled money through offshore accounts, and created a web of deceit that stretched across continents. And now, the two people who had destroyed everything in their pursuit of wealth were sitting in my office asking for help. I slammed the folder shut in frustration. The phone rang. It was Marion. "Danielle," she said, her voice soft but desperate, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would get this bad. I just wanted a better life. I didn't want to hurt anyone." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to keep calm. "You did. You hurt a lot of people. Including me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I never thought about you. I was too focused on keeping the family afloat. I thought if we could just stay ahead, maybe we wouldn't have to lose everything. But I see now. I see how much I've lost." I wasn't sure if she was talking about money or me. "You never saw me," I said, finally breaking the silence. "Not once did you look back to see how I was doing. You just threw me away, like I was never important. And now, you want my help?" "I don't expect you to forgive me," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need you to know that I'm trying to fix this. For all of us." I paused, hearing the genuine emotion in her voice. I didn't want to believe it, but part of me wondered if she really understood what she had done. "I'll help you," I said, finally. "But only because you've come to me with the truth. And only if you stop hiding behind the lies." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Thank you." I hung up without another word, rubbing my temples. This was going to be harder than I thought. Later that day, Charles and Marion arrived at my office with even more documents, bank statements, emails, names of people they'd dealt with in the past. They looked at me like I was their last hope. It felt strange. Not because I was doing the right thing, but because for the first time in my life, I was in control. I spread the papers across the table. "This is the last chance to fix things," I said. "You've created a mess, but I can clean it up. But you'll need to come clean about everything." Charles didn't look at me. He looked at the documents in front of him like they were some foreign language. Marion, on the other hand, made eye contact with me. "We're going to need a miracle." I didn't tell them that miracles didn't exist. But I did tell them what they needed to do: come clean to the authorities, admit to their wrongdoings, and allow me to use every connection I had to salvage what was left. It was a long road ahead, but this was what I had prepared for. This was my fight. And I wouldn't stop until the very end. The days blurred into weeks. Every moment was spent sorting through the wreckage, coordinating with lawyers, and digging into every last piece of financial dirt my parents had left behind. It wasn't just about saving them anymore, it was about showing them that I was the one who had the power now. The one who had built my life from nothing. Through it all, Marion seemed to fade into the background, often too emotional or too tired to handle the burden of their actions. But Charles? He kept fighting. Not for redemption, but for his own pride. He never stopped trying to twist the narrative, to make it sound like everything that had gone wrong was someone else's fault. But I wasn't buying it. One night, after a particularly grueling session with the lawyers, I found myself staring at my reflection in the glass of my office window. The city lights flickered below me, but all I could see was the little girl I used to be, the girl who had been left behind, forgotten. "You're doing the right thing," I whispered to myself. But it didn't feel like it. I hadn't spoken to anyone about it. Not even my closest friends knew the full extent of what was going on. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about saving my parents. This was about finally having the closure I had been denied for so long. I had to finish this. Not for them, but for me. It had been weeks of endless paperwork, late-night calls, and meetings with financial experts and legal teams. My parents had not made this easy. They constantly tried to downplay the severity of their situation, clinging to the illusion that everything would somehow work itself out. But I wasn't fooled anymore. The truth was out in the open now, and there was no escaping it. I sat in my office, the usual hum of the city below me, but I couldn't shake the suffocating weight of what I was about to do. My parents had come to me for help. They had asked for a lifeline, and I had given it to them. But in doing so, I was putting my career, and my own sanity, on the line. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back in my chair. The clock ticked on relentlessly. My phone buzzed, dragging me back into reality. It was a text from Marion. "Marion, I'm really scared, Danielle. I don't know what to do anymore." I sighed deeply. It wasn't the first time she'd reached out like this, but it never got easier to hear. She was still drowning in the consequences of her actions, and for the first time, I saw a glimpse of the person who had been lost in her pursuit of wealth. Maybe she did care. Maybe she was starting to see the damage. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then typed back. "Me, it's going to be okay. We just need to focus on fixing what's broken. But you have to stop hiding." Her reply came almost immediately. "Marion, I'm scared of losing you, Danielle. I'm scared of losing everything." I clenched my jaw, trying to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to spill over. Losing me? The one person who had fought to help them? But I couldn't let myself get lost in the past, no matter how painful it was. I grabbed my coat and headed out of the office, needing to clear my head. The air was cool outside, and as I walked down the street, the weight of everything hit me all over again. The resentment I'd been holding in for years, the years of abandonment, the years of pretending like I wasn't affected by what had happened. The realization that I was constantly picking up the pieces of their broken lives while mine was slipping through my fingers. I'd always told myself that I could handle it. I had built my own life from the ground up, after all. But this was different. This wasn't just about me. This was about people who had walked away from me when I needed them the most. And now, I was supposed to save them. I kept walking until I reached the park, where I sat down on a bench, looking out at the trees swaying gently in the breeze. My phone buzzed again, this time a call from Charles. "Danielle, where are you?" he asked, his voice more urgent than usual. "I'm out," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why?" "I need you to meet me," he said, almost pleading. "Now." I took a deep breath. This wasn't a request. It was an ultimatum. I knew I had to face them, no matter how much I dreaded it. When I arrived at the small cafe where Charles had asked me to meet him, he was already sitting at a table, his face grim. As I sat down across from him, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. "I'm done," he said suddenly, his voice low. "I can't do this anymore. I don't know how much more I can take." I raised an eyebrow. "Done? What do you mean?" "I've been lying to myself." "Lying to you," he admitted. "I've been trying to protect myself, protect my pride. But it's all falling apart, Danielle. And I don't know what to do anymore." I stayed silent for a moment, letting his words sink in. This wasn't the man I had known growing up. This wasn't the man who had walked away from me without a second thought. "What are you asking for?" I finally asked. "I need you to help me fix this. I don't care if I lose everything, I just want to make it right with you," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. I looked at him, seeing the broken man sitting across from me, a stark contrast to the proud and distant figure I had known my whole life. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something I hadn't felt in years, sympathy. But then the reality hit me again. This was still the same man who had left me behind. This was still the man who had walked away from his own child as if I didn't matter. I shook my head. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Charles. You don't just get to fix this with a few words. You walked out of my life when I needed you most. And now you want me to save you?" He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. The silence between us felt heavy. "I'll help you," I said finally, my voice cold and resolute. "But only if you're willing to face the consequences of what you've done. And I won't save you from your mistakes. You have to do that yourself." The days that followed were a blur of legal documents, meetings with financial advisors, and constant phone calls from Marion. Every time I picked up the phone, it was either her asking for another favor or my parents trying to justify their choices. But no matter how many times I told them the reality of the situation, they refused to listen. The weight of their decisions had crushed everything they had built. They couldn't seem to understand that their irresponsible actions over the years had led to this, being completely dependent on me. For the first time in my life, I realized just how much power I had in this family. But that power came with an unbearable price. It was Wednesday evening when I sat in my office, the final papers in front of me, signing off on the deal that would save my family, but at a cost I wasn't ready to pay. My phone buzzed once more, but this time, it was a call from Marion. "Danielle, I don't know how to say this," her voice trembled on the other end. "But I think it's too late for us." I froze, gripping the phone tightly. "What do you mean?" "Marion, we've been through so much. You just need to hold on." She hesitated, and I could hear the rustling of papers in the background. "It's the debt. It's too much for me. I can't." "You can," I interrupted, my voice firm. "We can get through this. I've been doing this for years. You can't give up now." "Danielle, she stopped herself, and for a brief moment, there was silence on the line. Then, almost inaudibly, she whispered, "I never wanted this. I never wanted to drag you into my mess." Her words hung heavy between us. In a strange way, I had always known that Marion was carrying the weight of her own guilt, but hearing her admit it out loud made it all the more real. "I know you didn't," I said softly. "But we have to deal with it together. We've come this far, haven't we?" I paused, waiting for her to respond. When she finally did, it was as if a new resolve had settled over her. "You're right," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll fight for this. I won't give up." I smiled slightly, feeling a faint spark of hope that I hadn't felt in weeks. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way out of this. But I knew there was still a long road ahead. As the night drew on, the reality of what I had agreed to hit me like a tidal wave. The sacrifices I had made, the pieces of myself I had given up, had led to this moment. But was it enough? Would saving them actually save me in the end? The next morning, I walked into the office to find Charles waiting for me at my desk. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he handed me a folder. "Here it is," he said quietly. "Everything. It's all in there." I took the folder from him, my heart sinking as I opened it. Inside were the final numbers, the debts, the unpaid bills, the creditors' demands. This was the endgame. There was no more pretending. I could either bail them out completely, or let them face the consequences of their actions. I looked up at him, feeling an ache deep in my chest. "This is it. This is the point of no return." He nodded, his gaze fixed on the papers in front of us. "I know. But I'm ready to face it. For once, I'm ready to take responsibility." His words struck me. For the first time in my life, Charles wasn't just the man who abandoned me, he was the man who was owning up to his mistakes. But I couldn't help but wonder, was it too late for me to make peace with the past? Could I ever forgive them? The following days passed in a blur. I spent my time negotiating with creditors, finalizing paperwork, and trying to balance the weight of my family's financial collapse with the chaos in my personal life. The phone calls were relentless, each one a reminder that I was the only one holding this sinking ship together. But despite my exhaustion, I couldn't afford to give up, not now, not when I was so close to pulling them out of the fire. It was a Friday afternoon when I finally reached the breaking point. I had just finished another marathon phone call with one of our creditors when I glanced at my inbox. There it was, an email from my mother. The subject line was simple but enough to freeze my blood: "I need to talk." I had avoided them for days, but now, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I opened the email. "Danielle, I know this may be the last thing you want to hear from me right now, but I need to tell you something." My hands trembled as I read the next line. "I regret everything. I regret leaving you, I regret abandoning you, and I regret not being there when you needed me the most. I understand if you can never forgive me, but I want you to know that I've been trying to fix my mistakes." I read the email over and over, my emotions swelling within me. For so long, I had yearned to hear those words. But now that they were here, they didn't feel like the closure I had imagined. They felt too late. The damage had been done. The years of abandonment, of feeling unworthy, could not simply be erased with an apology. Still, the small part of me that had been desperate for reconciliation couldn't help but soften. I quickly typed a response. "I don't know what you expect from me, but I'm not your savior. I can't fix everything. But I will help you this last time. After that, I need to focus on my own life." I pressed send before I could second-guess myself. The silence in the room was overwhelming as I stared at the screen, waiting for some kind of reply. But the minutes ticked by, and the phone remained still. No response. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't until later that evening that I received another message, this time from Marion. "Danielle, you don't have to carry all of this on your own. I know I've been distant, but I'm ready to help. I'm not going to let you do this alone." Her words were unexpected, and they hit me harder than I had anticipated. I had been preparing myself for this fight for so long, convinced I would have to do it alone. The thought of having someone, especially Marion, by my side was both comforting and terrifying. I paused before responding. "Thank you. I'm not sure what help you can offer, but I'm grateful. Just, stay with me in this." Her reply came almost instantly. "Always." The following weeks were a whirlwind of frantic energy, long nights, and endless meetings. But there was one constant: Marion. She stayed with me, helping me navigate through the mountain of paperwork and the emotional roller coaster that came with it all. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. And maybe that was all I needed, to not be alone in this. But there were still days when the weight of the past threatened to swallow me whole. I couldn't forget what they had done, what they had taken from me. I couldn't forget the years I spent wondering why they had left me behind. And then, one evening, as I sat alone in my office after everyone had gone home, my phone rang. The caller ID read Mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. "Hello?" "Danielle," her voice was shaky. "I don't know how to say this, but your father is sick. He's not going to make it." The world seemed to stop in that moment. My heart dropped into my stomach as the words hung in the air. My mind was a blur, but one thought pierced through it all: this is it. After everything, after all the years of pain, of abandonment, of betrayal, I was still their daughter. And somehow, someway, I had to face that reality. I didn't know if I could forgive them. I didn't know if I could ever move on from the scars they left. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to leave them hanging, not when they needed me most. "I'll be there," I said softly, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. I arrived at the hospital just before midnight. The waiting room was nearly empty, save for a few scattered families and the soft hum of fluorescent lights above. My hands clenched the sides of my jacket, my heart beating faster with every step. This was the moment I had both dreaded and prepared for, the moment that would force me to confront everything I had buried for so long. As I approached the nurse's station, I asked for directions to my father's room. The nurse gave me a nod, leading me down a sterile, lifeless hallway. Each step felt heavier, as though I was walking through a tunnel, unable to escape the shadows of my past. When I finally reached his room, I hesitated before entering. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear the faint sound of my mother's voice. She was speaking softly, as though trying to comfort him, but there was no mistaking the tremor in her voice. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. There, lying in a hospital bed, was the man who had abandoned me. His face was pale, his eyes half closed, and he was hooked up to various machines that beeped softly in the background. My mother sat beside him, holding his hand, her face drawn with worry and exhaustion. She looked up as I entered, her eyes flickering with a mix of guilt and sorrow. "Danielle," she whispered. "You came." I stood in the doorway, unsure of what to say. The anger I had once felt, the years of resentment, were still there, but now, they were tempered by something else. Something I hadn't expected: pity. The man who had torn my world apart was now so frail, so vulnerable. It almost felt wrong to feel anything but sympathy. My mother stood and stepped toward me, her hands clasped in front of her. "I'm so sorry, Danielle. I never meant for things to turn out this way. I know I can't undo what I've done, but please, try to understand. We were lost back then. We didn't know how to be parents." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice low but firm. "Don't make excuses for what you did. I'm not here to hear that." My words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. The pain from those years, the years of abandonment, still burned within me. She flinched, but nodded. "I understand." I turned my gaze to my father. His eyes fluttered open, and for the first time in years, our eyes met. There was a flicker of recognition, of something more than just the casual indifference he had shown me all those years ago. But there was no apology. No regret. Just a weary, almost defeated look. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible, as if the words were too heavy to say out loud. "I never meant to hurt you." I swallowed hard. The apology was all too late. But for some reason, hearing it now, after all this time, did something to me. I wasn't sure what I felt, whether it was relief, bitterness, or just resignation. But I did know one thing: it didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done. They had abandoned me when I needed them most, and no apology could erase that. Still, something shifted within me. I had spent so many years running from this moment, from the hurt and the anger. But standing there, facing the ghosts of my past, I realized that I no longer had to carry the weight of their mistakes on my shoulders. It wasn't my burden to bear anymore. "You've caused me a lot of pain," I said quietly, my voice steady. "But I'm not going to let it destroy me anymore. I'm here to help you, because I'm not the person I was back then. I've built my life. I don't need you to fix it." There was silence, the weight of my words hanging in the air. My mother's face crumpled with emotion, and I could see the tears pooling in her eyes. But I didn't flinch. I had made my peace with the past, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into the cycle of anger and disappointment. My father closed his eyes again, exhaustion overtaking him. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, turning to leave. "I'll take care of the financials. But after that, I'm done. I've helped you because it's the right thing to do. But I can't do this for you anymore." With that, I stepped out of the room, leaving behind the ghosts of my childhood. The weight of the years seemed to lift off my shoulders as I walked down the hospital corridor. I had done my part, and now it was time to move forward. The morning sun was creeping through the blinds, casting a pale, golden light across the sterile hospital hallway. The weight of the previous night still hung over me, but there was a strange calmness within me. I had faced my parents, confronted the ghosts of my past, and now it was time to close that chapter for good. I spent the rest of the day making arrangements, contacting lawyers, handling my father's finances, and ensuring that the hospital bills would be paid. I did it all with mechanical precision, my emotions now buried beneath layers of practicality. After everything I had been through, I had become a master at compartmentalizing my feelings. But deep down, I knew that I could never go back. I had offered them help, not out of love, but out of obligation. The kind of obligation that comes from a place of hurt, a place where you realize you've been given nothing, but somehow you're expected to give it all away. That night, as I sat in my apartment, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The phone rang, and I knew before I picked it up that it was my mother. Her voice was trembling when I answered. "Danielle, I don't know how to thank you. What you did for your father, for us. I know we've failed you in so many ways, and I'm so sorry. But I need you to know, we never meant for things to turn out like this. Your father, he's so scared." I closed my eyes, holding the phone to my ear, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything right away. The words she spoke felt rehearsed, as though she had been practicing them in her head for days. She was sorry. But sorry wasn't enough. "I've already done what I could," I replied, my voice distant. "I've taken care of the bills, the legal stuff. You can handle the rest." There was a brief pause on the other end, before she spoke again, her voice almost pleading. "Danielle, please. Don't shut us out. We need you. Your father needs you." I clenched my jaw. "I've been carrying the weight of your mistakes for too long. You're not going to do this to me again. I've helped because it's what you needed, but I can't keep doing this for you. I'm done." There was a moment of silence. Then, my mother's voice broke. "I understand. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just don't call me again unless it's about the money," I said, my voice steady but cold. I hung up the phone before she could respond, setting it down with a heavy heart. The air in the room felt thick, as though the weight of my decision had just settled around me. It wasn't anger that filled me anymore, it was something more final, more resigned. I had done everything I could to make peace with them. But now, it was time to let go. Over the next few weeks, I continued to put my life back together. I buried myself in my work, focusing on my career, channeling all of my energy into something that mattered, something that was mine and mine alone. I reminded myself every day that I wasn't the same person I was when I was 6 years old, abandoned in an orphanage. I wasn't that helpless child anymore. I had fought for everything I had. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their forgiveness. I had learned to survive without them, and I was stronger for it. The phone calls from my mother grew less frequent, and eventually, they stopped altogether. I hadn't expected anything different. My father's health continued to decline, and it wasn't long before I received the news that he had passed away. The call came from one of their distant relatives, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't cry. I didn't feel relief or sadness, just a strange emptiness, as if I had already mourned him long before he was gone. My closure had come years ago, in the moments when I had decided to stop carrying the weight of my parents' abandonment. Their departure had broken me, but it had also made me whole again. I made the necessary arrangements, finalizing everything without attending the funeral. It wasn't because I hated them. It was simply because I didn't need them anymore. The end.